Working with color in Affinity Designer is very powerful and very customizable. Compared to other apps or programs that allow you to pick color and create colors and save down colors, this one I feel is a little bit more extendable. By default, it comes with some palettes, like for instance this straight up colors one. There's gradients that come stock that are just basic black and white ones, and some grays. On top of that, you still have access to your Pantones, which is a good thing to have if you work in print or photography in general. Also are these system-based palettes. So these come in handy and are already probably on your system. This might look different for you if you're on PC, obviously because this wouldn't be the Apple logo, but you might have a Microsoft logo or something similar. The Affinity icon here demonstrates that that is an application icon. Where I'm going with this is to indicate the different types of color palettes you can create. For instance, an application-based palette, which is something you could have access to inside Affinity Designer entirely. So if you opened 5 different types of documents at once, you could still have that same palette available. For the document palette, you can actually have it just a palette for the document itself. I think that's the most common use case in most applications today. And then there is also the system palette, which is one you can create that is available in all Affinity programs. So that's pretty powerful to me. On top of that, you can export and import palettes, as well as create palettes from a document. You can create it as an application palette, as a document palette, as a system palette, as you see here. And a nifty one is from an image as well. So let's do that one real quick just to show you by example. I'm going to do this one since I have it open, and what it'll do is sample from the image and give you 5 colors by default. If you wanted to go ahead and increase that amount, you're free to do so. When you do increase it, you'll want to hit preview to the right, and we end up with 20. So that's pretty nice. If you want to, for instance, utilize these, of course you probably would if you're going through this, you can tell Affinity Designer where to actually save that. Do you want it as an application palette, a system palette, document palette, or the currently selected one? So let's go ahead and create a new document palette based off of this one. It should do this automatically for us. Yeah. So this is called Boy now, and that's the name of the file at this point in time. I can rename this palette to anything we want. Just say, I don't know, rice field. And then you're left with this document palette. So you could do that for a variety of different palettes and have these colors available to you. On top of that, if you wanted to create a new color, you can go ahead and sample it using the eye picker tool. And that's done by click and dragging to wherever you want to sample. Let's maybe do a green in here for now. We'll let go of that, and you'll notice it's live in this little bubble here. If you go ahead and get it as our foreground color, we want to actually click that, and then from there we can save it to our palette if we would like. So I can use this icon to add a basic swatch, or on top of that I can create a global color. So I'll create both at this point, and I'll show you what a global color is. So if you notice, there's this tiny little triangle on the bottom left of the global color here, and it's called global color 7. You can rename that as well. We'll go ahead and just show by example what this actually does and why it's pretty powerful. So let's say we just duplicate. So if I select all of these and decide I want to change the color down the line, I can do so all at once. So as you see, it went from green to purple there. And where this is very powerful is something like maybe if you're doing some UI design or something like that, those things can update in real time, and you can have different versions to perhaps show your clients, just so they can narrow in on a color palette that they're comfortable with. So that's essentially what global colors are. You'll want to use those as things that are repeatable, I would assume. If you, for instance, are designing buttons or form elements, stuff like that, that maybe apply to mobile applications or websites, that's a great use case there. On top of that, of course, we can export this palette. So say we want to save it and send it to a friend, or just have it as a backup, we can go ahead and hit export. We'll call it the same thing just for brevity's sake. So I saved it to my desktop. And as you can see, it saves it as this file type. It's AF palette. If I were to open that, it'll tell me that, but you can import it the same way. So if you were to import it, you can do it as a document palette again. We'll select that palette file, and it created one more of the same thing. So if you wanted to delete a palette, you can go ahead and do that just by clicking there and hitting yes and saving it out. So by default, Affinity Designer will come with these palettes loaded. You can go ahead and utilize these and you should be fine. But if you were to create something that you would later like to extend or just save down or have for your records, document palettes, application palettes, and system palettes are a great tool to manage color. On top of that, we have our basic color swatch panel here. From this, you can just simply sample a color and edit it as you see. So that's been a quick overview of color and how to manage it in Affinity Designer. It's very, very extendable, very customizable, which is some other apps don't currently have this type of capability. So I consider it very useful and a great feature.